people being armed and knowing that people are going to be armed is a deterrent for these mass shooters. So why do you think they very disproportionately choose gun-free zones to do their mass killings? Well, for vehicles, do you think to get cars, people should have to go through like extensive psychological evaluation, because people can use vehicles
they
to kill
can,
people
but
too.
it's not. You can say that about just about anything.
That's my point.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but.
All right, so we've been out here for about an hour and a half. You're the first person to step up today. Thank you for that. The topic is, whether you're pro-gun or not. What are your thoughts on guns? What's your position?
I cannot say that I am pro-gun. I can't say that I've had good experiences with guns. I grew up around guns. My family would shoot guns recreationally, just for fun. But also I've been very active in political protest. And I'm originally from Atlanta. And in Atlanta there was a major protest that was against them tearing down a big piece of forest in the middle of Atlanta and there's an abandoned
Cop
prison
City.
there.
Are you talking about Cop City? Yeah.
I was at the Cop City protest where someone was shot 37 times with his hands up. So that's slightly traumatic, and I can't say that I'm very pro-gun after that. I also come from a generation where there has been multiple shootings in schools. I don't see where guns should have any place in an academic environment, and I think guns in the wrong hands bring about a very corrupt system of power. That is my current stance on guns.
Sure. So wrong hands. The first example you gave, presumably this is, what was this, the police that shot the individual? So this is in the hands of the government, the people who historically are basically always going to have guns because they're going to be the enforcer of laws. So they're going to give themselves, that's the whole nature of government, is having the monopoly on violence. So they're going to have guns themselves. But what we're talking about here primarily is not just being like pro-gun in general, as far as like, liking the implement, whether it's in the hands of the government or the people. It's about giving the right to the people to keep and bear arms, like it's said in our Second Amendment. So, when you think historically, you talk about, I'm sure you believe in like the idea of oppressed populations, minorities, blacks fighting for civil rights.
I might not look like it, but I'm actually Hispanic.
Okay. I mean, you look Hispanic to me.
Thank you. It's in the eyebrows. That's really my
yeah.
one factor
So,
I got going for me.
Historically, you're familiar with like the Black Panthers and all that, and they believed in the idea of armed self-defense and resistance against people like the police who are armed. So what are your thoughts on groups like that who believed, hey, we have to police ourselves, we can't trust these racist police and things like that, we have to provide self-defense for our community, and in order to deter nefarious forces who want to do harm to us?
I believe that there is ability in peaceful protest. I think facing violence with more violence just leads to nothing. It just leads to a lot of chaos that doesn't need to happen. You've had instances in the past, MLK, all of those instances of peaceful protests that have gotten results. I know that there were...
Well, he got assassinated in the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not wrong, but it at least got us somewhere. It's a start for sure.
Sure. So during the Holocaust, do you think if Jews just protested more, that would have resulted in better circumstances?
Absolutely not. But I
Okay.
don't think armed resistance would have made much of a difference either.
Well, so they had
That's
the Warsaw
more-
Ghetto Uprising that actually kept German forces out for a month.
Okay, I can't say I'm familiar with that one.
Oh yeah, it's a very famous, and they didn't have much of anything. I mean, these were arms that they were able to maybe smuggle in, just like a few things here and there. It wasn't an army by any stretch whatsoever. Maybe you're familiar with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and things like that. I mean, the idea of the people in Gaza or West Bank resisting, or the ability of the Israelis to defend themselves using firearms, wherever side you fall on that. Like, these are the implements, and historically, you talk about, these implements, they're used, they cause violence, whatever. Historically, as society has gotten weapons that are more effective at killing people, society's actually gotten more safer over time. Homicide rates used to be much higher, hundreds, thousands, even back during ancient caveman times. You look at the skulls of ancient humans, and they all have like like axe wounds in their
Oh,
heads
absolutely.
and things like that.
I mean,
so.
humans will be violent no matter what, but I feel like making the ability to be violent more easily accessible, at least not with restrictions, because currently, as it is now, the ability to get a gun is so easy. There are hardly any background checks on that, and you can be just about anyone and get a firearm. That is scary to think about, like the general safety of...
Who do you think shouldn't be able to get a firearm in your estimation?
If you have a criminal background, or if you are known to be part of any extremist group, whether
So as far as
be,
criminal background,
well,
you don't believe in this idea of, hey, once you've served your time in prison, you're now back into society, we should try to reintegrate you. You've served your time, you're now a free citizen again. You don't believe in that idea.
I do believe in that idea.
But not when it comes to
But not
them
when it
having,
comes to firearms.
So they don't have
Say
the
you
right to
have-
defend their family or their lives or anything like that.
But that is such a very specific case.
What's specific? It's a case that applies to many people in the country.
It does.
Especially if you
but-
believe in the idea of systemic racism. If they're using the justice system to, I think it's something like over a third of black males in their lifetime will have, or even currently have, like a felony on their record.
That's
so you're
fair. I feel like it really
disenfranchising those
depends on what that criminal background is. If you have a history of violent assault or something of some such sort that is similar to that, or something that involves the use of a firearm, or just general violence in general, and you have been like rightfully convicted of that, I don't think you should be able to have a firearm again.
Isn't that more of a case, like, wouldn't you just not want that person in society in general? Like,
That's fair.
That's a case for more prison time. It seems like until the person's maybe rehabilitated. And if they're not rehabilitated, like, you don't want them in society, do you? You don't want
I
them walking
suppose
around with you
not,
whether they
but-
have a gun or not.
That's fair. I mean, well, that's one case, but then also I don't believe that firearms should be in the hands of people who are like heavily mentally ill. That's how you end up with people like school shooters and stuff like that, and then just suicide rates as well. That's just, if you are kind of mentally not where you need to be, maybe don't have access to a gun. I feel like
Sure,
that's
I don't
simple
think
enough.
most people are pro giving the mentally ill
Oh yeah, no,
firearms.
absolutely not. But it's
Yeah.
just I feel like more general checks should be done like that. Like, what is your criminal background that you have and why?
Sure.
What is your current
Do you think
mental
they
health
should do that
status?
for example, for vehicles? Do you think to get
For
cars,
vehicles.
people should have to go through like extensive psychological evaluation, because people can
I
use
wouldn't.
vehicles
They
to kill
can,
people
but
too.
it's not. You can say that about just about anything.
That's my
But
point.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But guns are kind of made with that specific intent to cause violence. That is what a gun is for. I mean, cars have other uses. Guns, realistically, it is for the use to harm someone or something. So, I don't know. You're not going to buy a car and go, oh yeah, this is purposely to kill people. For a gun, it's a little different. It's a little bit more manufactured with a certain intended use to harm or to be able to cause damage of some sort.
Sure. So when we look at states in America, would you assume that if a state, for example, had much looser gun laws, that they would necessarily have higher homicide rates?
They had looser gun laws. I would imagine so. I mean, you have places like Japan that have very little homicide rates, and their gun laws are pretty strict. It's not exactly easy to get a gun in Japan.
Sure. But they have much higher suicide rates
Oh, they
than
do,
the United
but
States of America,
that
and
is-
they have no access to guns, basically.
They don't, but suicide rates is a little different. Japan itself has a lot of very deeply rooted systemic issues, from pedophilia to neat culture to... So there's a lot of issues with Japan, don't get
But
me
they
wrong.
also have a lot of benefits to the point where they have such a low homicide rate to begin with. For example, our neighbor to the south, Mexico, they have very strict gun laws. I think they might even have only 1 to 2 gun stores in the entire country. Like, it's not a very prevalent thing to have a gun out there. But they have a much higher homicide rate than we do here in the United States, despite us having a much higher gun ownership rate.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, Mexico is a little different in that it's not exactly, as much as there are high gun laws, it's not exactly regulated. My family's from Cananea. We can't go there anymore. It's way too dangerous to go there. Not because
How is it not
of-
regulated?
How is it not regulated? You have a lot of just outside groups that are kind of, I would say, not necessarily in with the government, but have enough of their own power that they can function.
Oh, these
away
are
from the
criminal
government.
cartels. So they're
Exactly.
breaking the laws. It is regulated, but criminals are able to break the law in a way to circumvent the law. So
Yes.
the law doesn't really seem to stop them in that sense. So
That's fair.
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those, you're never going to be able to stop gun violence. That's just, I feel like in human nature, violence will always be around. But at least a little bit of regulation on it could help. It's a start. That's the thing. We're never going to be able to be like, oh yeah, let's get rid of all guns or make all guns easily accessible. Neither is the right answer. That's the problem with this. There is no right answer to this.
Sure.
But there is at least a start in being able to stop gun violence, and just a couple more background checks. Make them a little bit less easy to, just less accessible. That's the thing. We're never going to get to a solution to this, but you can at least have a start.
Sure.
That's my
so
take on it.
The safest states in the union are basically New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Idaho, and
Okay,
I think like
so, you know,
Massachusetts. Those places have some
BFE type states.
I mean, but here's the thing. Even in states where, let's say, for example, you take Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, if you control for race, the homicide rate, I think, for white people is something like 2 something per 100,000, and then it goes up to like 80 when it comes to black Americans per 100,000. So that's a difference of like 40x. The gun laws are the same whether you're white, black, whatever. The access is the same. Why is the homicide difference so drastic there, even though the gun laws are the same for all those people? It seems like there are other factors. Basically, in the United States, white people have an effective rate of homicide similar to that of very gun-controlled Europe. So what are your thoughts on that?
I can't say. Also, I do apologize. I am
Oh,
at my
no
time
worries,
limit.
no worries.
Do
Thank you
let
for
me
talking
finish.
to us.
Of course.
Thank you. So, I'm pro-gun. I'm assuming you're not.
I say that in my experience, it's not a good thing. There have been it's my school, for example. We've had multiple gun-related deaths. For
This
students.
one or
no, my high school actually. We've had.
Where was that?
Is at Austin East High School, Magnet High School. There have been.
What state?
Here.
Okay.
I grew up here, Knoxville, Tennessee. There's been a decent amount of gun violence around where I grew up and where I live, so I don't have a good view of it. I do completely agree that people have the right to defend themselves. People have the right to bear arms and protect their property and protect their home. But it becomes a problem when, first of all, the restrictions to getting a gun aren't as high as they should be. You know, there are certain people that should never even have the vicinity of a gun, but also, you know, there's the whole illegal market for guns, and trust me, if you can't get it the legal way, you can get it the illegal way. I would know. There's a lot of people in my community that have found ways around that, and I know that there's ways to do it, but I say I don't have the best out view of it based off where I grew up, how I experienced it. It's especially in where I grew up in my home, my mom doesn't even like to mention the advent of a gun, or if she ever did, she would say it would be for here and it would be here to protect us. It would not be for anywhere else. And that's where it would stay, because, you know, that's...
Sure. So is it fair to say that your experience with guns was more so on the illegal side? So people who are using them primarily for crime or obtain them illegally because they might have, for example, felony backgrounds, etc., or drug backgrounds?
I will say that most of the gun-related things had come from underage kids or people that were affiliated with certain people.
Sure.
Most
So it's more on the criminal side.
It's more on the criminal side of it.
So what do you think, for example, in the history of black civil rights, where groups like the Black Panthers or even people like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, who owned guns, carried guns, talked about the need, not so much Martin Luther King always, but like the need for armed self-defense, or, you know, especially when you couldn't trust the police, who they viewed as racist and would brutalize their communities. They believed in providing, policing their own communities with firearms. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it was more of the black community's expression to be an American. You know, being an American is having these rights that you are you are rightfully so, like, you can do this, you can have this. And naturally, being a black person growing up in America, sometimes you feel like you don't have those rights, or sometimes you don't have the extension of those rights. So during the civil rights movement, there was a big push for us having these rights and having these civil liberties that we normally couldn't indulge in, or if we did indulge in, it would not be seen as an American thing to do.
But that's not usually what they were saying. They weren't saying like, hey, we're fighting for our right to keep and bear arms. They were like, we already have this right. We're going to exercise it because it's what we need to do in order to combat, say, racist police, or to defend our communities and things like that. That's usually what they were talking about.
Well, from that point of view, so back in civil rights, police were did not take black crimes or pretty much the black community seriously.
You think they do today? You think it's
I think it's a little better, but I do not think it's anywhere near the level it should be.
So wouldn't that still necessitate what they were saying back then is still the idea of, you know, black people arming themselves, the community, in order to defend themselves?
people have taken the initiative. It's been people have more black people have taken more.
Absolutely. But do you see that as a bad thing?
I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it more as it's a community as a whole. We've never really had a place where we were just safe. You know, we never had a place where we could just be and not have the threat of something happening. Because, you know,
sounds like a reason to have a gun.
Yeah, so that's why there's been way more demand on it. There's been way more people have been like, you know, this is our right. You know, we're Americans. We're trying to align ourselves in being an American. You know, even though we're black, we're also still an American. We have these rights, and we can exercise them. So why not? And, you know, now that more black people are getting real estate, more black people are getting homes, you know, they're getting property, they actually have something to protect. Back then, there wasn't a lot for black people to protect. I mean, sometimes they had
all the
homes.
more reason now to
there was more reason to do it. But
so why are you anti-gun then?
I'm more anti-gun because of just, I feel like it's just been the events of how guns have been used. I feel like, in a sense, I understand, and I completely agree with it being used for its protection and being used to protect people and protect your property, protect your home, protect anybody you need to protect. But I say that in the recent decade or so, guns have been used in a very disproportionate way, and especially in places like my communities or schools or in general, they haven't been used to protect people. They've been used to hurt people.
Oh, you're talking like mass shootings in schools.
Mass shootings, schools.
You know those are gun-free zones, right? Like currently right now here on your university campus, we're in a gun-free zone. So if someone wanted to come here and break that law and massacre a bunch of people, nobody here who is getting shot would be able to defend themselves if they were a law-abiding citizen who was like carrying or whatever, which they can't do on this campus. So do you think, you know, since all these mass shootings very disproportionately, it's something like over 90% of them happen in gun-free zones, don't you think that is saying something when these shooters specifically, for example, the shooter in Tennessee who shot up the Covenant School, that person specifically had another location in mind but decided against it because of the security parameters that were in place at that school and decided to go for the Covenant School. It seems like people being armed and knowing that people are going to be armed is a deterrent for these mass shooters. So why do you think they very disproportionately choose gun-free zones to do their mass killings?
Well, I will say most of these people that are school shooters, they have some type of psychotic break, or they have some type of undisclosed medical, or, you know, they can just be psychopaths. It can really range from whatever type of thing that they're suffering from. But I feel like they go there because, one, sometimes it's more of a personal thing, you know, like certain shooters, like the Columbine shooters, you know, they did that specifically for a personal agenda. But also there are other people that do it for more of a motivator. It's because, you know, they know that these places won't be as protected as others. You know, you go to a school, I know at my school right now, there's probably about 3 resource officers that have, you know, probably a taser.
This one or your previous school?
My previous, like, high school.
Okay.
Yes. So, you know, someone coming in there with a gun, it wouldn't be hard for them to get through any type of security that would approach them, because they don't have much to go for. And I understand why you say, you know, as a they're a gun-free zone, you know, shouldn't they have more guns and be able to protect themselves? But then that can also backfire, because we're talking about a bunch of guns at a place where it's supposed to be for learning, a place with a bunch of kids that have no business to even be thinking about, you know, all of the safety threats that could be coming to them. You know, they go to school to learn. They don't go to school to, you know, be concerned about their safety every 24/7.
Well, sure. Isn't that the whole reason why you would want, for example, armed guards there? I mean, we protect everything that we value in this country with armed guards, with guns. So whether that's the president, or if it's banks, or, you know, basically anything that we value, we protect with people with guns. So why would that not apply to our children, who people would say are pretty precious?
It would have to be with people that are adequately trained and are ready and prepared for this position.
So like a police officer, or you know, someone who's trained, like maybe teachers who decide to go through the training, that whatever that is.
I understand that point, but there's one part that I have a gripe with. That is, where would they keep the gun in itself? And you don't know.
Presumably on their person.
And that's probably not the greatest idea. Yeah. Especially, there are kids in schools that are not.
Yeah, you could also have like a safe or something, like a quick deploy safe.
Be a safe or something like that. I feel like I don't disagree with it verbatim, but I will say that the only concern is what would happen if one of these kids were observant enough, or, you know, were bold enough to do something like that.
Sure, I think you would have different policies. Like, for example, I don't think there's going to be a huge threat from first graders, like, you know, wrestling the gun away from a teacher, right? Maybe that's a bigger concern for high schoolers. So maybe in a case like that, depending on who the teacher is, what their class is like, what the historical levels of, you know, violence or whatever, maybe you and you know, you don't tell the students which teacher has a gun or whatever, but you could maybe have it in like a quick deploy safe or something like that, of course. But yeah. So getting back to the gun point, so you seem to think like loose gun laws result in more homicide. Is that fair to say?
I say so.
So some of the safest states in the United States are New Hampshire, Maine, Idaho, Vermont. These are some of the safest states when it comes to gun, or just homicides in general, in the country. But they have some of the loosest gun laws in the country. Why do you think that is?
Well, those places that you just mentioned, I know not a lot of people live there, not a decent amount. So I will say that could be a reason, because more populous places are of course going to experience more crime and more homicides and all of that, because there's just a bunch of people.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You can have rural areas, and because they have such a low population, one homicide can make it so they have the highest homicide rate ever. But, you know, you look at most of this country, the majority of counties in the United States where, you know, they don't even have a lot of gun laws or whatever, over 50% of the counties had 0 murders in the year 2020. And then it's something like close to 70, like 3/4 of counties either had 0 or had only 1 homicide in the entire county. So, and that's 18% of the population within those counties. So most of the homicides are happening in these sort of concentrated areas, cities. But even when you look at those cities, when you look at different populations in them, for example, you look at Chicago, you look at white people in Chicago versus black people in Chicago. White people, it's like 2 per 100,000 homicide rate, whereas blacks, it's over 80 per 100,000. So there's a 40x difference even within the same city with the same gun laws. Why do you think that difference exists?
Well, I feel like stereotypically, I feel like I can attest to it, because stereotypically people would assume that black people are the perpetrators, are the criminals in certain instances.
Is that stereotypically, or when I say the data, like that's just the data?
I mean, data, that's what it is, but I say that data can mostly be attributed to black people grow up to thinking that that's what they're supposed to be. There are a lot of black people that really assume that if they're not out in the streets doing whatever, what else is there to do? I feel like naturally growing up in those areas, it kind of tricks you to think that's what I need to do. That's what I need to be. That's what people do here. That's what I need to do. You know, those communities, I'm not saying that those communities never stood a chance, but I am saying that over the decades, those communities have been adjusted to having people like that in their communities, or growing up to be people like that in their communities.
You're saying it's like kind of more of a cultural problem where they have this cultural belief ingrained that like criminality is sort of accepted. It's the norm.
I feel like it's more like those people don't have the outlets to see that there's way more out there than just gangs and gangs, all type of activity like that. Some of those people don't have an outlet. And what I will say that sometimes the system fails some of these kids. You know, some of these kids have a horrible upbringing, and it can be very, very easy to spot these kids and tell which ones will probably live a life of crime and which ones will actually adjust and go into society. And I feel like sometimes the system doesn't allow them, or doesn't try to help, because they've already been deemed as unhelpable. They grow up in a certain community, they grow up around a certain amount of people, they grow up around this crime. What can they do? Instead of saying, hey, maybe we should try to give these kids a better outlet. Maybe we should give these kids somewhere to go. Maybe we should give these kids an opportunity to express themselves in other ways than potentially falling into a life of crime. I feel like it's not always like that. And I feel like they've gotten better at trying to give these kids a better outlet, or give these kids an example else to follow. I feel like that's the main thing. They just don't have anywhere else to look, because everybody else is telling them that they're doomed to go this way. The statistics are telling them they're doomed to go this way. The people are telling them they're doomed to go this way. The government's telling them they're doomed to go this way, because the statistics, this is happening. But no one's actually trying to think, how can we resolve it? How can we make it that these people don't feel like they have to get into this life? Why is there another way that we can persuade them that this isn't necessarily the way of life that they need to go to, even though the statistics will tell them that that's where they're going to go, even though people would tell them that's where they would go.
All right. Thank you so much. Awesome. Anything else you want to say, or?
I mean, you got debate's not my strong suit, so
we're not even really.
I mean, it's not. I know it's not
talking.
debating; it's talking. So, yeah. But I mean, you've opened my eyes to a lot of things. But I will say that statistics aren't really the friendliest sometimes, because in the past they've been used to manipulate certain communities into thinking that they're just bad. You know, and the community that I grew up in, yes, there's gun violence, there's poverty, there's all of that, and there are kids there that kind of just assume that that's what they were meant to live up to, and there's no one else there. There's no one there to try to change that for them. There's no one there that's there actively saying you can be more than this. You can be better than just a statistic on the board. You can be more than that. And I wish that, even though these conversations are productive and they're nice and they're good to learn, I wish that some people will understand that it's a whole cultural difference. You know, these kids grow up learning that, you know, that's what apparently they're envisioned to be. When some people see me, they get surprised in the way I talk. They get surprised in the way that I present myself. They get surprised in the way I'm a computer science major, you know. Oh, you're not an athlete? You're not I feel like it's just pre-existence biases just people have, and it's just, you know, it's hard to shake them because systemically and societal, like, that's just what people know. But I wish that people would see more of the humanity and not just the numbers and the statistics of it. So that's all I have to say. I think some people should look way more into just the numbers, because these kids and these people that we talk about all the time, they're more than just numbers, and these are actually people that have lived here and that have experienced some of the worst things, and sometimes people won't even give them the time of day to talk about the things that they experienced, or even give them the space to talk about it. You know, they would rather just say that's just growing up. It's growing up where we're here. Growing up.
No, I agree with most of the points you made there. Awesome. Thank you.